So good day. We're learning Igeres HaKodesh. We're on page 238. This is letter number 13. And to briefly recap what we've learned till now, the Alter Rebbe wrote this letter approximately in 1792, and he sent it with a messenger, a shliach, to the communities in Russia, White Russia, Ukraine, wherever, to get them, his Hasidim, to get them to give more tzedakah. Now, some argued that their tendency is not to give so much tzedakah because they are what we call left-oriented, gevura-oriented. Everything they do is limited, measured. And other people said they don't have. In this letter, the Alter Rebbe looks deep into a Yid, and he finds within every Jew, even a Jew who's gevura-oriented, the ability to do chesed, to do kindness and benevolence, and to give. And in fact, he says, if you are left-oriented, gevura-oriented, you're disciplined, Avram, which I'm sure you are because you're a musician. You need to practice the notes and know exactly the tunes. That's part of discipline and gevura. That's only more of a reason to give. And why? Because when chesed gives, when someone who is right-oriented, who's chesed-oriented, the giving isn't necessarily genuine, 100%. There's some iota of selfishness there. What is that selfishness? The selfishness could include, it's my nature to give. In other words, and if it weren't your nature to give, you wouldn't give. So the only reason you're doing it is because that's your nature. So in other words, the giving coming because of nature isn't 100% pure. It's not 100% genuine. It's based on a nature. Says the Alter Rebbe, but when you give based on gevura, that means you give because this is what the Torah wants you to do, then it's totally genuine. It's against your nature, and you still give. And the Alter Rebbe says, guess what? Everyone has both an element of gevura within chesed and chesed within gevura. And this is why he mentioned Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, the two classical houses of thought in the Talmud, the school of Shammai and the school of Hillel. Now, Avram, normally Hillel, throughout Shas, throughout the Talmud, is lenient in his rulings when he and they disagree with Shammai. Shammai comes from the word shamin, which means to estimate, to regulate, to measure. Shammai is disciplined and strict. Shammai rules throughout the Shas in the most stringent way. Hillel in the most lenient way. This is when they're disagreeing with each other. However, in 6 places, only 6, throughout the Talmud, the vast Talmud, we find the reverse. That Shammai is lenient and Hillel is stringent. And the question is, how is that possible? If Shammai's stringencies is because of the left nature of Shammai, the gevura, the soul. In other words, it stems from the soul. It doesn't begin in the Talmud. It begins because Shammai was given such a soul that's gevura-oriented, and vice versa for Hillel. So how can Shammai vacate his zone? I mean, if we accept and we understand that that's where it's coming from, that everything we do, Avram, is not just because we understand that, or we feel that, or we act that way, it's coming from somewhere deeper called the neshama, the soul. And the soul is what drives our understanding, our feelings, and our behavior. So if the soul is a stringent soul, how can it even be in one place? Mind you, 6 places, it's lenient. So the Alter Rebbe answers that question here in this chapter. And the Alter Rebbe says, that's because there's an element of kindness within discipline. We call that chesed shebegvura. And at times, the chesed within the gvura comes out. And why it comes out in those 6 places, I don't know. But that's what happens. And the same is true with Hillel. Although Hillel's soul orientation is chesed, there's an element of gevura within chesed. So for example, a child takes a knife, holds a knife, and can hurt themselves or others. The parent takes away the knife from them. That act of taking it away is chesed or gevura. It's gevura, but guess what? It's gevura within chesed, because the purpose is not to be mean and not give the child a knife. The purpose is that the knife shouldn't hurt anybody. If we knew that the child won't hurt himself and others with the knife, the parent wouldn't take away the knife from him or her. Because after all, what did they do? They just took a knife. So the child wants a knife. Be kind. Let him have a knife. Imagine the knife wasn't a knife, it was a fork, it was a spoon, it was a book, it was something else. You wouldn't make a big deal about it. So what is driving the gvura of taking the knife away from the child? The chesed orientation. I really love the child, therefore I don't want the child to hurt myself. That's called gvura shebechesed. And the Alter Rebbe says this is what we have happening in the rulings of Shammai and Hillel, where they reverse their roles, and each one rules contrary to the way they rule their nature. Says the Alter Rebbe, you're right, because what's coming out is as Isser taught us, the recessive gene. Remember, we spoke about the dominant gene and the recessive gene. It's the recessive gene that's coming out. The dominant gene in them is either chesed or gvura, Shammai and Hillel, gvura and chesed. And the Alter Rebbe uses this, as we continue the chapter, the Alter Rebbe uses this to explain to the person who says, what do you want from me, tzedakah? I'm not that type. I don't just give. The Alter Rebbe says, then you have to tap into your chesed within gevura, and let the chesed within gevura do the job, and then you'll give, and you can give, and your giving is more genuine. And that's a great novelty, a great chiddush of this chapter, that the chesed within gevura, of a gvura type of person, of a disciplined, judgmental, strict, stringent type of person, is more genuine. You ask someone in the street, they'll say no. Someone who's magnanimous and his house is open and is always giving, they're more pure, they're more genuine. Says the Alter Rebbe, not necessarily. So now let's turn to page 238, and we are, I would say, about 10 lines from the top. It's the last 2 words on the line, V'zeu she'omar. The Alter Rebbe returns to the verse that he began this chapter with. The chapter is a pasuk in Tehillim. Mo rav tuvcha shetzafanta l'reyecha. David HaMelech, King David, says to Hashem, how abundant is your goodness. It's so great, it's so abundant that you hid it. Tzafanta, you hid it l'reyecha to those that fear you, and when Mashiach will come, they'll experience it. Then there's another part of the verse that the Alter Rebbe alludes to with the words v'goymer. He doesn't bring the second part in the Tanya itself, but he alludes to it with the words etc. v'goymer, which is whoever shields themselves, kol ha'chaysim bach, whoever shields themselves in you God, will have the revelation. Neged b'nei Adam, it'll be open and obvious. So let's see how he explains the verse now. And this is the meaning to which David HaMelech said, how abundant is your goodness, etc. Kloima, this means that the attribute of goodness, v'chesed, and benevolence, asher hi b'pchinas helen v'hester eitzel kol misha shoyrish shposim b'pchinas moel, which normally is concealed by someone whose soul's root is in the left. Hanikri b'shem yireyecha, and we call those people the ones that fear you, because they are yira, or fear, discipline, judgment, stringency, strict. Kemidas Beishamai, like analogous to the attribute of Beishamai, as we explained earlier. Then, so although it is goodness that is hidden, Avol Pikei, nevertheless, Hurav v'godol mi'oid. It is very great. It isn't just good, it's an abundance of good. Kamei midas hagedula, it's analogous to the attribute of what's called hagedula, greatness, v'hachesed mamish, and it's actually like benevolence, chesed. From which level? Shemebchinas yamin, which comes from the right. V'shteyen heim b'pchinas gilui, Beligvul, and both the chesed and the gedula and the chesed are revealed beligvul umida v'shir, without limitation, measurement and discipline and regulated. In other words, it's Adam finitum, beligvul. V'zeh shekosov marav tuvcha. This is the meaning in the verse that we began this chapter with. How abundant is your goodness, so says King David to Hashem. Kleimar, this means, B'li gvul umida. How abundant is your goodness, God, without limitation at all. Bein hatoiv asher tzofanta l'reacha. And this abundance of good is experienced in what you've hidden for those that fear you. Ubein asher, and this is the second part of the verse, Po'alto lachaisim boch. You have impacted those, you've impacted those that shield themselves in you. Shehem bali habatochin. Now, interesting, Avram, look, the Alter Rebbe adds here a nuance that we didn't have before. Who are the people that are called chaisim boch yaini? They shield in you, those that have betochin, trust. Shemebchinas yamin, betochin, which comes from the right, v'chazdom, v'toivam, and their benevolence and their goodness, who gam came b'pchinas gilui, v'ishpashtus. And in this case, their kindness and their benevolence is also in a manner of revelation, v'ishpashtus neged neodam, and expands itself to all people. And it doesn't remain concealed. When you have betochin, when you have trust in God Almighty, but real betochin, not, you know the story. The lady is there on the Kol Nidre, and an appeal is made, and she makes a pledge. And then she starts to herself, says, I didn't really mean it. I'm not going to give $10,000. I just, I was inspired, but I don't even. Then she goes home and she walks over a rickety bridge. And the bridge starts shaking and it's about to fall in, and she's going to fall in and die. Just, God, I really meant it. I'm giving the $10,000. That type of betochin is not what we're talking about. That's called bluff. That's called fear. You're fearful of your own hide. That's all about self. It's all gaiva, yeshus. Now, by the way, is it better to give that way than not to give? Practically speaking, it is. Because we say, Chazal say, from doing something not for a genuine sake, it'll lead you to do it for the genuine sake. But nevertheless, regardless, as far as we're concerned in this conversation, in this discussion here in Tanya, bitochen, we're talking about true trust, not a trust that's predicated on self, not a trust that's predicated on, I know what the end result is. You don't know what the end result is. You see? If you know what the end result is, then it's not bitochen. Then you know you have the information. It's called seichel, intellect. You know that, I don't know, let's say Trump's becoming president, and therefore he's going to open up the oil reserves. And you make a decision based on that to buy a stock or not a stock. Is that called bitochen? Not 100%. At the end of the day, you don't know how the market's going to go, and if there's going to be God forbid, a war, and the oil market will crash. So there is definitely an element of bitochen there. I'm just using a silly example. But bitochen, pure bitochen, means true trust when you don't know, and you say, I put my trust in you and Hashem. Says the Alter Rebbe that this revelation of Kol HaChosem Boch, when a Jew relies on Hashem and puts herself in the hands of Hashem and says to God, you are my shield and you will help me and I rely on you and you know what's best for me, that attitude leads to the abundance of God's kindness being revealed to you. Let's continue. Umashe kosuf l'reyecho v'loi biyirecho. So the verse should have said, Avram, Morav tuvcha, how abundant is your goodness, biyirecho, in those that have fear for you. When it says le, Avram, the le is a conjunction, right? To. The lamed before yirecha means to those that have. It should have said be. The abundance of good is within those that fear you, not to those that fear you. Says the Alter Rebbe. Mashakos of lirecha with a lamed. V'loi be yirecha with a beis. Hainu mishum. This is because shekol ma shu b'bchinas helem b'chol neshama. This is because whatever is concealed within every soul, it's not invested in the body, in the mind and heart. It hovers over the person. The soul aspect, you hear this, Yoini? The soul aspects are always are b'pchinas makif. They hover. They're there. And they accomplish things within a person, but it's not bepnimius. It's not inside, in where it's like you can touch it and feel it and all that. Umishum, let's continue. Umishum, and from there, humeira, it illuminates lemoichai, from the soul. It illuminates the mind, the libai, and the heart. Leitim atzrichim, to those times when you need them to inspire you. L'sayridis b'pchinazu, to arouse this level, shetisayrid v'toyer l'moichi v'libay, that should arouse and awaken your heart, your mind and heart, b'kidei l'avay l'idei ma'aser v'poel mamish, so that you actually act upon it. If you do that, so the Alter Rebbe's answer, this was a parenthesis, a parenthetical remark. Why does it say, Morav tuvcha, it's a fanto lireyecha, with the lamed instead of bireyecha, bi? And the Alter Rebbe says, that proves my point, because bi means, Avram, it's in you. It's not within you. Of course, in other words, the soul, the root of the soul, the Sheirosh HaNeshmasa, is our counterpart in heaven. That doesn't come into the body. What's in the body is that part of the soul that's limited. that's already been meshed with the body, with the mind, with the heart, with action. So therefore, it doesn't say Morav Tuvcha Shetzafanta Bireyecha. It says Lireyecha. In other words, that every person should know that they have a source. And this is a very important point in life. We have to know where we come from. We come from Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov. We come from the patriarchs and the matriarchs, and we come from Moshe Rabbeinu. I'm saying we come from a klal. We are not here alone. No Jew can feel alone. I'm sorry. Because no Jew is really alone. Unfortunately, sometimes we feel alone. But the truth is that the Rebbe always said this, Torah Tziva Lono Moshe Merosha Ke'ilas Yaakov, Torah God gave us through Moshe is an inheritance. In other words, you're not alone. You belong to the Jewish people. The fact that you might live in Timbuktu and there aren't Jews there, so what? So what? That's only an external thing. But who are your people? The Jewish people. And the Alter Rebbe says this in the context of the neshama, that the neshama as well, the soul as well, the sheidish neshama, it's not bireyecha, it's not in us, it's only hovers, it's makif. So the language in the verse implies that that God gave it to those that fear you. It's still yours, but it's not within you in a pnimius. And this idea, we'll finish the rest tomorrow, Mitzvah Shem. But I just want to say that here we are in Chodesh Kislev, only a few days away from the special day of Yutes Kislev, which Chabad calls the Rosh Hashanah of Hasidus. And there's nothing to be embarrassed about, because the greatest Litvaks, Reb Chaim Brisker, Reb Chaim Oizer of Vilna, they recognized that this is an important day. It happened that in the year 1901, when the Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Rebbe of Sholem Ber, wasn't in Lubavitch for Yutes Kislev, so he wrote a letter because the Hasidim were very, very upset that their Rebbe is not there to celebrate Yutes Kislev with them. But for health reasons, he had to be out of the country. And in this letter, he writes that Yutes Kislev is the Oyer V'chayas Nafshenu, it's the light, the energy, the vitality of our souls, and he calls Yutes Kislev the Rosh Hashanah of Chasidus. The Hasidim in Brisk at the time was in Poland, maybe still is, right? The Lubavitcher Hasidim, the small group of Chabad Hasidim in Brisk, didn't get this letter till several months later. I think close to Purim time, right? Because Yutes Kislev is now Kislev, Tevis, Shvat, Adar, 3 months, whatever. They became aware of this letter, and when they saw this letter, they said, "Wow, we didn't celebrate Yutes Kislev with knowing that." So they asked Reb Chaim Brisker, "Can they make a day when they're going to celebrate Yutes Kislev in Adar?" And Reb Chaim told them, "Absolutely." And he didn't say it just to pacify them. Reb Chaim was a goyin, a Yiras Shamayim, and a serious person. If he said you should celebrate your Yutes Kislev Yom Tov, again, it's meaningful. And regarding Reb Chaim Oizer of Vilna, who wasn't a Chassid, it was a Litvisher, he said about Yud Beis Tammuz, after the Frierdiker Rebbe was released and saved, and Hasidim made a festival the following year, as we do every year from then. So he made a statement, by uns wird weniger, by us, the Litvaks, it's becoming less and less because Haskalah crept in and removed many frum people from religiosity and orthodoxy and frumkeit, including Litvaks, Litvisher. And by Zay Kum Tzu, and by them, by the Lubavitcher Hasidim, there's added more and more. Another Yom Tov. Another Yom Tov. Now, I want to make it clear. It's not that, the isms of the time didn't impact Hasidim. It did. But nevertheless, what was the attitude of Lubavitch? Was, you got a problem? Add more light. And that's what we see today. Look here, this gentleman, this Rav, this Shliach was killed. Cold blood, was murdered, was kidnapped and killed. What's Chabad doing? Adding more, adding more. You never allow the enemy to take hold by scaring you. And what do? You double your attitude of toiv and good and more programs, and double the amount of programs. And we learned it from the stories that I'm telling you. And the Rebbe, our Rebbe, lived this way. After he had his heart attack in 1977, and it was a massive heart attack. I was there. And we all had to go out of the shul. That was in the middle of Shmini Atzeres at Akofis. But that was considered a mild heart attack to the second heart attack that he had in the middle of the night or towards the end of the night, 3, 4, 5 in the morning, I forget. And it could have taken his life right there and then, and he survived. 1977. What did he do the next 14 years approximately? He added so much Torah, so many Chabad houses, so many Shluchim, so many Hasidim, and it doesn't stop. I'm scheduled to be this coming weekend with Shem to do a Yutes Kislev Fabring in Roslyn, New York, in Long Island, and then Motzei Shabbos in North Forest Hills, in Queens. Young Shluchim. I know their parents and grandparents. And look at this. They go into a neighborhood, until now, Rabbi Hecht, I don't know if you remember, Rabbi J.J. Hecht's son, Shalom Ber, his oldest son, may have it for Shalema. He was a rabbi in Forest Hills of an Orthodox shul for years, 40, 50 years. And now, there's in North Forest Hills, you understand? You got to find a neighborhood where another shliach, a nephew of his, I think, parks himself, opens shop, I'm here to help Jews. Only adding, not ever retracting and going down. And this is the same thing that Rebbe said, that Eretz Yisrael should take Damascus. I remember the Rebbe's words in 1974. I remember him saying it. Why? I don't know all the, political or strategical answers, but I know one thing. That Rebbe was a good man, and he wasn't into grabbing property. And he felt that the safest thing for Eretz Yisrael at the time was to go to Damascus. They didn't listen. They did not listen. So now, 74, 50 years later, it's 2024, right? 50 years later, we didn't get to Damascus yet, but we got that part of the Golan. And again, the point is, do more. Don't suffice with just making up what you did. But when there's a problem and an issue, double your efforts. Chevra, we'll see everyone tomorrow. Have a great day. Take care. Bye.
Rebbe, when are we doing the Fabrengen?
Thursday morning.
Okay.
Thursday morning.
Okay.
Take care. Shalom. Bye-bye.